Morning, this is a response to a video by Sugelanren called If the Woo Works, a rambly question for conference report. Thanks for that. I appreciate the video. I don't know how coherent this will be, it's quite early in the morning here, but I'll give it a go. Question, I might be misinterpreting your question, so I apologise for that. But it seems to me there's two things you're talking about. One is about the possibility of, I guess, kind of overthinking things, you know, whether trying to, what you describe as compartmentalise or rationalise or something like that, experiences like the ones during meditation has a detrimental effect perhaps, or maybe stops you gaining certain benefits from that. That's one thing to do with that. And you also talk about, I guess, kind of the woo working, you know, whether something like meditation or other kind of spiritual practices, broadly speaking, have any kind of health benefits or, you know, practical outcomes in the world. I mean, the first thing, overthinking stuff, I don't think that at all, no. In fact, I feel very strongly the other way. I suppose I'm reminded of that that stuff to do with, you know, unweaving the rainbow. There's a book by Dawkins called Unweaving the Rainbow, but it's based on a poem, I think by Keats, but it might be somebody else, where he's kind of criticising Newton. Isaac Newton, you know, gets the prism and finds out the components of white light as being the spectrum, and that, you know, kind of starts to explain what a rainbow is. And Keats is saying, if it is Keats, he says, oh, well, you know, now that Newton's unweaved the rainbow, you know, the magic's gone out of the world, we can't appreciate rainbows anymore, seems to be the impression. But of course that's not the case, is it? It's an additional way of appreciating rainbows. It doesn't detract from the original, it adds another. You can appreciate spectrum now, you can appreciate, you know, the wonders of science, all that kind of stuff. So, and the same thing applies to this, I think. I don't meditate right now. I used to quite a bit, but I never had that sense of that detracting from it. I mean, you use the word compartmentalised, and I think that's kind of interesting because I don't sense myself as compartmentalised. I'm just finding different ways to think and talk about stuff. I certainly wouldn't want to put something like meditation into a particular kind of compartment of activity and say it just belongs in there and there's no other ways to talk about it. You know, the more ways I can think of to engage with a certain kind of practice, you know, whether it be meditation or driving or petting my dog or thinking about stuff, whatever it is, the more ways I can engage with that, the richer it becomes for me. So I'd say no, it doesn't do that to me at all. I don't think that. In fact, and this might be a bit idiosyncratic, but one of the things you mentioned there, you're talking about how your Tai Chi instructor gives this this phrase: you don't grab, when you're climbing the tree, you don't grab the blossoms, you grab the branches. And I think that's really interesting because for me that's about kind of theory and practice. That's not the phrase, the terms in which you put it, but that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. Partly because I made a video in response to something Laura Layla said a couple of days ago about that. You know, because you know, for me the practice is often at the heart of what I do. You know, what I think about. That's where what I put at the centre of my attention usually. So something like meditation's difficult. Something like driving a car, because you mentioned driving a car, don't you? You know, driving a car is the practice, and that's the I guess the prototypical, the central activity. But for me, it kind of folds out in different directions afterwards, perhaps, or during, occasionally, but certainly afterwards. You know, it folds outwards into a series of, you know, explicit ideas that I can talk about, you know, I can kind of talk about how well I was driving, I can talk about mistakes I made, or I can go and find out, talk to other people about ways of improving my driving, those kind of things, yeah, read the highway code. So there's all sorts of explicit things which fold out from that practice. And then there's learning that folds in from it. You know, I mean, my intuitions as a driver come out of the practice. You know, I don't start with the intuitions. I don't really start with the explicit knowledge. I start with the driving, and then these things, it folds out in different directions. An inward direction where my intuitions are being developed, and an outward direction where it's more explicit and shared and communal. But the practice is primary, yeah, and it's kind of unified. You know, this in-out, intuitive, explicit, tacit, explicit. Those kind of things are very dual, aren't they? You know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with dualism sometimes. It helps you think sometimes. But the activity itself is not like that. And for me, that's primary. And it's only the subsequent folding out in different directions which allow different things. And I can see how that might seem like compartmentalization. But I don't think it is in its essence. I think the compartmentalization comes as a result of the fact that here we are engaging in explicit activity, right? It's already folded out into the explicit realm. Here we are talking about it in language and doing that kind of thing. And I think part of that activity gives it the impression of being compartmentalised, and it isn't really. The primary activity isn't, for me. Thought that makes some kind of a sense. Yeah. And the other thing was to do with woo and efficacy. I mean, this is interesting, isn't it? This, because I didn't do, like yourself. I started off doing meditation through martial arts. I used to do Thai boxing a long time ago, and then that led into other kinds of martial practices, and then a little bit of Tai Chi. I didn't go on very well with that, and then meditation. So it kind of came out of that, but I was never really interested in the health aspects of it. I mean, people say it makes you calmer, and maybe it does. I don't know. People say it gives you better balance and reflexes, and maybe it does quite. But to be honest with you, even if it was detrimental, I'd probably still do it. And of course, there are spiritual practices, if I can call them that, which are distinctly detrimental. Oh, Phoebes. You know, some forms of yoga have been criticised as being detrimental. I don't know if that's true or not, and not just because they put your back out, but you know, people do say that they're kind of psychologically damaging. I've heard. Again, I don't know if it's true or not. Just going to open the door because Phoebe wants to go out. Hold on a sec. Hang on, Phoebe. There you go, But you know, ascetic practices from history. You know, whether it's sitting on top of a pole for days on end, or fasting, or taking some of the chemicals, the entheogens, I think they're called, which some cultures engage in, can be damaging. A lot of them. Some cultures engage in kind of piercing and body modification practices as part of their attempt to change the way they see the world. And you know, they're not going to be good for you, are they, really? And whilst I wouldn't recommend those, I would have no hesitation in trying them if I thought it was going to be interesting. And I kind of have in a small way. I mean, I did a video with pushing a meat skewer through my face, and it was partly a joke, but it's also there is a kind of tiny serious element to that, to do with separating of oneself from the experience of pain, for example. So yeah, I wouldn't want to simply say, oh well, these kind of woo activities are good for you because they're good for your body, you know. And whilst there is some support for that in some areas, I don't think that cuts to the heart of it, really. For me, it's more the more interesting aspects are, I guess you might call, psychological aspects. Although I would want a broader definition of psyche than just what goes on inside your brain. A way of changing your engagement with the world, the way you think. You know, because a lot of the ways we think, it seems to me, the metaphors we use to think, come from our embodied experience, don't they? And if we give ourselves different embodied experience, we're giving ourselves different models of thought. If we allow ourselves to experience the world in different ways, you know, I mean, practically, you know, it's back to that climbing tree stuff. If you give yourself a different embodied experience, then you're giving yourself a kind of different set of tools to think with as well, it seems to me. And a different way of seeing the world. So that's that, really. Anyway, thanks for that Sugelanren hook. Was that right? Anyway, yeah. I don't know if I've been very coherent. As I say, it is like 5:45 in the morning. Anyway, thanks very much. Bye.